coming on the air with maybe an off-ramp for President Trump here. The first we're hearing from him about those retaliatory strikes from Iran. You see here missiles soaring in the skies over Qatar. As the president suggests, this may be the end of it, at least for now. We're live at the White House and in the Middle East with more on the back and forth between Israel and Iran and the first look at those B-2 bombers that struck Iranian nuclear sites. But how effective were those attacks? And where's the enriched uranium now? Then there's what all of this may mean for your money, why Wall Street doesn't seem to be too worried. Plus, our team goes one-on-one with a U.S. Marine veteran who says his dad was brutally attacked by Border Patrol agents in California. How he's responding to what the feds are saying about his father, who's now in federal detention. And that monster heat wave melting millions of us across the country right now. When the soup will stop simmering. Coming up a little bit later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we got a lot going on tonight, especially in just the last hour, because it seems like we may have the answer to a question the world has been waiting for. After Iran's retaliatory strikes on a U.S. base, will President Trump take an off-ramp in this conflict? And it sounds like the answer is yes. Not just yes, but a congratulatory yes, as the president tells the world it is time for peace. You see it now as he downplays those retaliatory strikes. That's after the scene you're looking at here. These are the missiles over Qatar, targeting the Al Udeid air base in just about 40 minutes outside Doha, roughly. You've got anywhere from 5,000 plus U.S. troops that are stationed there at any given time. Two U.S. defense officials say these attacks, these missiles, you see, they were all intercepted. And it's not clear whether the base itself was even hit. The president is confirming nobody died, nobody was hurt. And here's the thing. We're also learning Qatar knew in advance about the attack. The president says Iran gave them a warning. So you might ask, OK, then what was the point? If everybody knew beforehand and if key assets had time to be moved or sheltered, was this Iran flexing its own military muscle to its own people to show that it did something? It looks like maybe, and that's not nothing, because it would have been virtually impossible for Iran to do nothing after those U.S. strikes on its 3 nuclear sites late Saturday. Those strikes carried out by U.S. B-2 bombers. And take a look. These are the actual jets. This is video we're just getting in the last hour. These are the actual stealth bombers that participated in those attacks on the facilities, including one, Fordo. It's the one that's deep underground. You're seeing here some of the before and after in satellite pictures when those bunker buster bombs dropped. You can clearly see a crater. You can see those 3 holes there, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom as well in some of these images. You've got Iran's supreme leader in just the last couple of hours posting this picture of a U.S. flag burning and a post that basically translates to, "We will not surrender to anyone's attack." So that is where things stand right now, 5 o'clock Eastern, in what has been a very fast-moving day of developments as we're watching the scenes in the region. There's a lot of questions that you probably have. We do, too. Some of them, maybe the biggest, is this it? Right now that President Trump says the Iranians have, in his words, gotten it all out of their system, does this mean that for now the conflict that's been at a boiling point can stretch back down to a simmer? Were those U.S. strikes on the Iranian nuclear sites actually effective? This is a tricky one, this second question, because nobody has independently been able to go in and check yet. And most importantly, who is safe right now in the region? Are we talking cyber attacks, attacks that could be next, U.S. troops, Iranian or Israeli civilians, countries like Qatar now caught in the middle? There's a lot to get to tonight. We've got team coverage here in Washington and in the Middle East, and we'll start tonight outside the White House. I want to bring in Yamiche Alcindor, who's joining us now. You've got the president even thanking Iran tonight, Yamiche, because of what he describes as this early warning of their retaliatory strikes, which he describes as very weak. So does this mean that a door to diplomacy is open? Is the president walking through it?
Well, that's a key question, Hallie. What we know is that U.S. officials, including the president, as well as Department of Defense officials, were really monitoring and bracing for any attacks across the Middle East. So when these missile strikes were attempted, the U.S. was ready to defend itself. That being said, as you said, the president is essentially hinting at the idea that Iran gave them a notice. I want to read to you part of what the president posted online because it's really striking. He said, "I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost lost and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region. And he went on to say something that's really interesting. He said, I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. Now, that last part is very interesting because essentially what the president is saying is that he's also going to talk to Israel, of course, that being Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, one of his close allies, to say that he also wants this to be de-escalated at this point. The big question, of course, is can there really be a diplomatic way forward, which was, of course, your key question. It's unclear at this time because the president is saying he wants to have these talks with Iran. He wants to sort of move forward in peace. But the big question is whether or not Iran has changed its posture and whether or not it thinks as a country that it can move forward and have actual talks that will be prosperous and effective in negotiating here.
These online posts, these Truth Social posts from the president are significant, Yamiche, because this is the first that we've really heard from him since those retaliatory strikes, maybe looking at the clock, three and a half hours ago. And it is clear that the president, it seems, wants to turn the temperature down, which is notable because it was less than 24 hours ago that he was floating the prospect of regime change, of being supportive of the idea of a change in the Iranian regime, just hours after his Secretary of State and his vice president said, no, that's not on the table here. That's not what we're interested in.
Well, it's interesting because the president, even using the term regime change, he said that it was a politically incorrect thing to say, but he also was saying, look, if the leaders of Iran can't, quote, make Iran great again, that they should maybe be moved out of the way. But as you said, President Trump and top officials are also, and the president's top officials, including, of course, the vice president, are saying, no, we're not asking for regime change. The White House press secretary was also out this morning talking about this issue. Take a listen.
Why shouldn't the Iranian people take away the power of this incredibly violent regime that has been suppressing them for decades? And so our posture has not changed. Our military posture has not changed.
So a real interesting line that the administration is walking here. President Trump is not all out calling for a regime change, neither was the White House press secretary, but they're also essentially hinting at the idea that if the leadership did change in Iran, that it could benefit the country and benefit negotiations, Hallie.
Yamiche, thank you very much. Outside the White House for us tonight. Let's take you right to the region where NBC's chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, is joining us in Erbil, Iraq. And Keir, you know, worth noting that you are in Iraq because there was a question of whether Iran would target the U.S. bases there. In other nations, we know, obviously, that the one in Doha, just outside Doha, was targeted, Al-Adid. And there was an early warning, according to both the president and, based on our reporting, an early warning to the Qataris as well. Explain to us how something like that unfolds and what you're seeing tonight.
Well, you know, Hallie, I couldn't hear your question too well there, honestly. We are here in northern Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan, so I will tell you that much. I mean, it's difficult to get here. There are no flights, and we did spend the past, few hours wondering whether the U.S. base that's behind me there was about to be hit by those missiles from Iran. The reporting on the show so far has been so great, but I ultimately, was listening and thinking, come on, because are we really saying that the Iranians, by kind of pulling their punches, if you like, in this missile strike in the last few hours that only seems to have targeted Qatar, really are raising the white flag? I think probably not. There are so many questions left, including what will happen to the enriched uranium, 60% enriched, can quite quickly get to beyond 90% in order to be able to be, usable in a nuclear weapon. What will happen to the regime that the Israelis have been talking about being opposed to, clearly calling for regime changes? You set out there that President Trump has been suggesting he would like to see overthrown. Just today, just this morning, the Israelis hit Evan prison, a notorious, terrible place where they jailed opposition leaders and many others and torture people. The Israelis hit the front door, blew the front door off. Clearly an indication, no prisoners escaped, the Iranians say, an indication that the Israelis are hoping to destabilize Iran. So is this the Israelis looking, the Iranians looking for an off-ramp? Very likely. Does the Trump administration, would they like to de-escalate? Very likely. But what do the Israelis think of all this? I think that is a looming question, as well as the still unanswered question of how much damage have those strikes over the weekend really done? How devalued, if you like, is that Iranian nuclear program?
Keir, I'm going to assume that you probably can't hear me for this one if you couldn't hear me for the first question. So I'm going to let you go. We're going to bring you back, though, because I do want to chat with you more.
I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Well, that's good news. That's good news.
I hear you now, Hallie, thankfully.
Because the questions that you have laid out, though, are what we laid out right at the top, right? Some of these questions about the enriched uranium, where exactly is it? What is the damage to those nuclear facilities? But this question of de-escalation, you know as well as anybody from your time in the region, from being there now, not just in Iraq, but your other travels throughout the region, that in so many ways the world was holding its breath. Because if there had been a forceful response, let's say more forceful response from Iran, something that caused, you know, God forbid, the deaths of American service members, there was a real sense that the president would have felt compelled to respond even more forcefully. And then you're in what the United Nations Secretary General called that rat hole of retaliation after retaliation, which, Keir, you know the world had feared.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it extraordinary that tonight we are talking about a sigh of relief just hours after the Iranians fired missiles, very likely right over our heads here, to Qatar. The fact that they were shot down, the fact, though, intercepted, the fact that the Qataris were given notice, the fact that the Iranians appear to have targeted a fairly remote base in a country that they are somewhat friendly with, and that was, and clearly appears to have been a calculation by the Iranians that this was a safe way to react. Well, any one of those missiles could have got through. I mean, it was incredibly dangerous. My only point here, really, Hallie, is that there are many, many dangers remaining. Can the US and Iran and Israel come to terms? I think that's a huge question still.
Keir Simmons, live for us there in Iraq tonight. Keir, we're glad to have you there. We're going to bring you back, I know, later on in the evening. Appreciate that. Let me bring in somebody who's been the tip of our spear for the reporting from the Pentagon, and that's our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby. Okay, Court, so we've gotten through sort of the most imminent military piece of this, which were those missiles that, as we've been talking about, Iran fired at that air base outside Doha here. There had been some level of past precedent, as you well know, from covering the strike against, of course, Soleimani back in 2020, the Iranian response, then President Trump's response as well. There had been some degree of historical precedent for something like this to happen. Walk me through the view from where you are at the Pentagon on what happens over the next 48 hours now.
So the big question is this the extent of the Iranian retaliation? And the reality is, officials we're speaking to are hopefully optimistic that maybe this is it, but no one is saying that they have any certainty. They don't have any kind of indication at this point from the Iranians that we're aware of that this is it. Now, Hallie, as you mentioned, we've seen this happen before. Back in 2020, Iran responded to the killing of Qasem Soleimani by firing missiles, ballistic missiles at al-Assad, an air base in western Iraq. A lot of officials here seem to be hopeful that we'll see a similar thing, sort of essentially the back and forth essentially fizzles out. But again, at this point, it's just not that clear. We're still not even really getting a good picture of exactly what unfolded here today. We know we're getting, frankly, completely different accounts of what happened from the Qataris versus the United States. President Trump saying that 14 missiles were fired out of Iran at Al Udeid Air Base. 13 were knocked down. One landed somewhere but didn't do any real damage. The Qataris putting that number at 19. Saying that 18 of them were shot down. It's not even immediately clear who shot them all down. That also in dispute from the two sides. But again, at this point, officials believe that this attack against Al Udeid is now complete. No casualties, no serious infrastructure damage. And the hope, as I said, is that this is sort of a one and done. And this is the extent of the Iranian retaliation. But no one's saying that with any certainty at this point, Hallie.
Especially, Court, I would imagine, because the prospect of a cyber response is also not off the table yet from Iran, right?
Exactly. And remember, we've been talking about the proxy groups. Look, Iranian proxy networks in the region have, in some cases, been taken offline, right? Hezbollah, severely damaged. Hamas, same thing. The Houthis have taken some hits. I mean, they've still shown the ability to continue to try to target Israel, so they're not completely offline. But there are some of these smaller groups that exist still in the region that have shown a propensity for targeting U.S. bases, including in Iraq, including in Syria. It's not really clear if they would play any kind of role in this Iranian retaliation at this point, Hallie. Again, it's just too early to know. But at this point, there is some hopeful optimism.
Courtney Kube, live for us there at the Pentagon Court. We're glad to have you today and every day doing your reporting there. Thanks, friend. Appreciate you.
Thanks.
As you know, Iran and the U.S. are not the only ones launching missiles. Look at here, smoke rising over Tehran from new Israeli strikes today after you see Iran doing the same. This is some dash cam video that was captured. You see, obviously, that explosion right there from a car. I want to bring in our Richard Engel, who is live for us in Tel Aviv. Richard, we're glad to have you and a lot to get to tonight. I want you to start big picture here because domestic political pressures have been a factor in all of these countries, for the U.S., for Iran, for Israel. In your view, considering your experience and your expertise covering the region for so long, have the Iranians done enough for the audience at home to show that they did not let the U.S., in the words of Iranian officials, hit and run, essentially?
It's hard to answer because there are so many different parties involved. You have the U.S.-Iran dynamic, where the U.S. carried out this strike, the U.S. carried out its attacks on nuclear sites, and Iran responded to that component of this war. But the Israelis are still striking, and the Americans are working with the Israelis. The Americans are working with them, providing air defenses. So it's very hard to separate them out. How can you say, well, yes, maybe this part of this conflict could be slowing down, but if the Israelis are still attacking and they're getting advice from the Americans, they're getting weapons from Americans, and the Israeli Ministry of Prime Minister's office just put out pictures the other day of more American weapons arriving into Israel to help them with their air defenses, then it's hard to know if the Iranian response is over. Because the Iranian foreign minister just a short while ago put out a statement on Telegraph saying that they will respond again to the Americans if they are hit, which sort of suggests we're not going to respond to the Americans anymore if they're not hit. But they didn't talk about the Israelis, and that campaign is still going on actively with the Iranians and the Israelis trading attacks, and not symbolic attacks, attacks designed to hurt each other and kill each other's citizens every day. I mean, while we're on air, we could get air raid sirens and have to either report on it or go into a safe room here. So is this over? A facet of this is over, but they're all interlinked. So it's hard to know. And that's why if you look at that quite bizarre statement from President Trump when he was kind of mocking the Iranians, saying, you know, what you did was weak, but we're glad that it was so weak because maybe now we can move on and you got the hate out of your system. He also said he will actively encourage the Israelis to engage in negotiations and engage in a peace process. That was the part of his statement that got the most attention in this region, where everyone is looking at Israel saying, OK, if Israel slows down its attacks, because this began with an Israeli surprise attack on Iran's nuclear program in the midst of negotiations. So if that slows down, then maybe there is a window to open up a peace process that everyone in this region would really like to see involve Gaza. If you turn on, you ask the domestic politics, in the Middle East right now, not a lot of countries have come out in support for Iran, in support of the Iranian regime. It's Gaza that they want to see resolved immediately because of the humanitarian crisis there and the dozens of deaths every single day.
I'm so glad you brought up that piece of the president's comments there as it related to Israel, because that is, I know, a reporting nexus for so many of us here at NBC News, Richard. The other piece of this, too, is about the initial attacks on Saturday night, the attacks on those 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. And it is not at all clear, as Keir Simmons, as others have laid out already in this broadcast, how the level of damage, at least that has been independently reported, because nobody's been able to go in and look, and then where that enriched uranium actually is now, with some real questions that Iranians may have moved it, that they may still have access to it. You know, they don't know what they can do with it for now if the centrifuges have been destroyed. But that is a piece of it that is still in serious question tonight, Richard.
And Hallie, that piece worries me the most, I think, out of all of this. This looming question of what happened to these 400 kilograms of more highly enriched uranium, which, yes, is not combustible. You can't turn it into a bomb. It won't go bang like a nuclear weapon, but it could be used as a dirty bomb. It's still 60% pure uranium, and we're talking about 880 pounds of it, roughly. It's a small thing. You could put that in a van. And I worry that unless that is tracked down, intelligence agencies will either be looking for it or will be claimed they'll be looking for it, and there'll be this mysterious black van that everyone is looking for, and it could be a pretext for another invasion, another kind of Iraq scenario where you're accusing your adversary of having weapons of mass destruction that it doesn't have. All the more reason to go back to negotiations, because part of these negotiations would be having inspectors on the ground. That is something that Iranian officials told me they'd be willing to do. They'd be willing to get rid of the more highly enriched uranium. A senior Iranian official told me that specifically before he was targeted on that first night by the Israeli surprise attack. He survived, according to posts that he's been putting out. He told me they would do that. They would get rid of their more highly enriched uranium, these mysterious 400 kilograms of 60% uranium. Where it is right now, we don't know. The Iranians say they removed it and then didn't say anything else after that. But they said they would also accept inspectors on the ground to verify this whole process. That would be the much easier way to find this missing material, get eyes on it, instead of creating this myth of dangerous material that could be held anywhere in a very large country.
And the other part of it, Richard, that I would imagine is worrisome to so many folks in the region is that there is no timeline for when something like that would be able to happen, for when anybody outside of the Iranians would be able to get their eyes on the specifics of where this uranium is.
Well, the Iranians right now they're operating under attack. Their leadership is under attack by several accounts. The supreme leader is in a bunker, cut off from communications. He's already has some sort of succession plan in place. The Iranian people are cut off from the internet. Military commanders are being killed as soon as they take their new position. It's also a very dangerous time because if you don't know where they've put it, and attacks are happening on military sites all the time, you could hit it. So it is very important to get an inspection regime underway so you have some clarity so that there aren't misunderstandings, there aren't manipulations, warmongers who want conflict and just endless conflict. You don't want to give bad actors excuses to continue to do bad things. And having some eyes on this material as soon as possible can only lead to more peace and stability.
Richard Engel, live for us in Tel Aviv tonight, our chief foreign correspondent. Richard, glad to have you as always. Thank you. Back here at home, even with these developments overseas tonight that we've been talking through, you've got federal officials, state, local law enforcement all across the country still on high alert in the face of what two U.S. officials said was a direct Iranian threat previously to carry out terror attacks in the U.S., including maybe even activating so-called sleeper cells in this country. Yeah, the Homeland Security Secretary asked about that today. Watch.
We've seen some from overseas and some that have been here, maybe gone overseas for a short period of time, become radicalized and come back, or individuals that are right here in the United States. So we have to watch for all of it and to be diligent on all of it, and we'll continue to do so.
I want to bring in NBC's Tom Winter, who's joining us now from New York. Okay, Tom, so we've been talking over the course of the last 23 minutes about the sort of immediate kinetic attack overseas from Iran on that U.S. airbase being over for the moment here, but some questions about what else Iran could potentially do, whether it's in the cyber field, whether it's something like a domestic attack on the U.S. Give us a reality check on the capabilities of Iran to launch or direct an attack here in the U.S., because if you look at past precedent, they've not been successful as they've tried to do some pretty daring stuff here.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Hallie. So there's a couple of different things that law enforcement agencies are looking at. The first thing that they're taking a look at is the idea that somebody could be angered, could be motivated just by what they're seeing overseas, either issues with U.S. policy, Israeli policy, Iranian policy, whatever it might be, and be compelled to act here. That's a very difficult threat to stop. It's not necessarily an Iranian threat. It could be any segment of the population, and that's something that always concerns them. The specific to Iran, I think a year ago, this would have looked a lot different than it looks now. And that's because Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy, a designated terrorist organization by the United States, was really active. And just to kind of pull out there what the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security was referring to, there have been a number of cases here prosecuted here in New York and in other parts of the country where individuals were frequently interacting with Hezbollah, either going there and getting training, and very specific training on firearms, grenades, bombs, those types of things, or conducting reconnaissance in Boston, New York, Washington, D.C., some of that even here at Rockefeller Plaza, and sending that back to Hezbollah should they want to put an attack together. But the idea that there are sleeper cells here, that's something the Iranians said. There's nobody in custody here in the United States. And if somebody was directed to act by Iran, that in and of itself is a federal offense. So that person would be arrested. So I think that law enforcement is acutely tuned into this issue, but I'm not so sure that there is something imminent. Iran doesn't have to worry about midterms, Hallie. They have a long timeline here. And so as long as this regime is in power, well, that's something that they have an option to look at.
Okay, when you look at the way, though, that the Department of Homeland Security, that federal law enforcement officials here at home are working to keep people safe, there are some former Justice Department officials that tell NBC News that the National Security Division over the Department of Justice in the Law and Policy section saw a pretty significant cut in staff. Counterintelligence lost about a third of its people here. What are you hearing about whether short staffing could be a concern at this moment of sort of intense national security focus?
So not casting any doubts on that reporting at all. Those types of things did occur at the management level. But, you know, Hallie, I think a lot of people will identify with this. Management can change at big organizations or at big companies, but at the end of the day, there are still people out there doing what they need to do within those organizations. And so I think at a more local level, just based on my reporting and talking to the people that I'm talking to, they're still focused on these issues. They're focusing on the cases. In some instances, those people were moved from headquarters to the field. But certainly, this is something that has been a concern for law enforcement and something we'll obviously continue to follow.
Tom Winter, thank you very much. When you take a look at the markets, what happened there, what happened with oil prices, for example, interestingly, the markets all closed up, mostly shrugging off the retaliatory strike from Iran after what, as you've heard, some have called this almost symbolic retaliation. Look at oil futures, too. You take a look, they're falling off a cliff, about 7% down, right around 12:30. That's right when those strikes started to be reported. It seems to be the market saying they don't think there's going to be a big shortage of oil due to this conflict anytime soon. I want to bring in NBC's Christine Romans, our senior business correspondent, for more on this. We talk all the time about how the markets do not like uncertainty. So help us understand when it comes to oil prices, when it comes to where Wall Street is, why we're seeing the numbers that we're seeing.
You know, it's so interesting. In the market's view, this largely symbolic response from Iran is something they like to see. It means they don't think Iran's going to be trying to, close the Strait of Hormuz. When I hear symbolic response, I think it's symbolic for anybody except for somebody who's got a family member in the military in one of those places who's very concerned about just how dangerous the situation is. Because, Hal, the situation is still really dangerous. And, I would say these markets are incredibly volatile. It takes a quick headline or one little misstep to move things around. So I would put that in perspective today. You had a big run up in oil prices over the past 10 days or so, and then you had a relief move here today because the Iranians seemed to telegraph what they were going to be doing and seemed to be limited and, quote unquote, symbolic in their response. So there you have it.
Christine Romans, thank you very much for that quick check. Appreciate it. Coming up here later in the show, new questions over a video that shows a violent arrest by Border Patrol agents. But this man's son is now telling our team tonight. We are back with a check of the day's other big headlines, including that boiling hot heat wave that's melting millions of people. Some 160 million of us under heat alerts from Kansas City over to Boston. And this can be not just painful, but dangerous. We know at least 9 people in New Jersey have had to be taken to the hospital because of how hot it is. Temperatures in some spots have broken records already, and that's only going to intensify into tomorrow with a state of emergency now in New York City.
It's one of the most deadly weather conditions that we could experience in our city. And it is imperative that we prepare ourselves.
I want to get to Emily Aketa, who is live for us there, out in it. Emily, part of what makes this so dangerous is that it's not as though there's relief in sight anytime super soon, right?
Yeah, Hallie, that's absolutely right. Look, we've got this picture-perfect scene. It looks beautiful, this backdrop behind me, but I can tell you it feels anything but. We're talking about a suffocating, a blistering, and unrelenting heat that's really impacting a huge swath of the country. Some 160 million Americans facing heat alerts, and more than a dozen major cities, including here in Philadelphia, facing extreme heat warnings. I was talking to Philadelphia first responders. They've actually deployed additional medics as part of their heat squad to tend to the increase of calls related to heat-related illnesses. They say some of the signs that they look for when it comes to heat exhaustion: heavy sweating, headache, dizziness, nausea, and a fast heart rate. I've been speaking to people out here about how they've been trying to beat the heat. Take a listen.
I don't know. The humidity takes it to a different level, you know? So it might say 90, but it feels a lot hotter.
Feels like triple digits?
Yeah.
Okay, so you went from sleet to brutal heat.
Yes.
Yep. I see you guys lugging your luggage in this heat. Describe the heat.
It's just
overwhelming, overpowering, suffocating.
And just to underscore the seriousness of the situation, in New York City, for instance, on average every year, there are more than 500 heat-related deaths. And unfortunately, I wish I could tell you it's going to get better, but the peak is actually tomorrow, with some 50 cities threatening those potential daily records, Hallie.
Emily Akata live for us in Philly. Emily, thank you. Also tonight, there is anger that has been building up over this video of an arrest, video that's gone pretty viral by Border Patrol agents in Southern California. It was caught on cell phone. We're going to show it to you, but it is, of course, disturbing. You can see somebody on the ground surrounded by multiple Border Patrol agents. So you can see he's getting essentially punched in the head while being held down. He then gets loaded into a car. There's people in the video you can hear in the background asking, why are the officers hitting him? And just this afternoon, you had the Department of Homeland Security pushing back, saying that this man assaulted federal law enforcement officers with a weed whacker, calling media coverage a completely slanted portrayal. They posted another angle where you can see the man running with the weed whacker. It doesn't necessarily show an assault that we can tell. This man, now confirmed by NBC News to be Narciso Barranco, a landscaper working in Santa Ana. One of his sons telling us that all of his children are American citizens, either active duty Marines or veterans, and telling Julia Ainsley it is not in his father's character to attack anyone, that he was in fact acting out of fear.
They had their guns out. He was scared. They didn't have any type of identification on the front of their vests, so he just ran away.
I want to bring in Julia, who is joining us now here. In super plain English terms, Julia, what happened here? What led to the moment that we saw in that video, and what has happened since then?
Yeah, well, we spoke to the son, who was the oldest son, who was on his way to visit his father in ICE detention. He said his dad was on his way to a landscaping job. He is an illegal immigrant. He came to the country from Mexico. He'd been trying to get legal status in the country for some time. He had 3 U.S. citizen children who served with the Marines. But he said that he was picked up, and he didn't understand who it was who was chasing him. This is according to the son. Now, DHS has a much longer statement on this. They say that the illegal immigrant ran. They're talking again about this man's father here. They're saying that he ran, and then he would turned around swinging what was a weed whacker directly at an agent's face. He then he rushed through a busy intersection, and he raised the weed whacker again. They go on and on, Hallie, really to say that he resisted the commands and that he did not identify himself. In this case, I think what's happening, though, and we're seeing this time and time again, is people not knowing who these agents are. And so they're putting up defense, thinking that these are masked men without any kind of identification on the front of them, exactly saying who they are. And so we asked the son, did they use minimal force? Because according to that statement, they said DHS and ICE officers, and in this case, Customs and Border Protection, are trained to use the minimum amount of force necessary. I asked him if that happened. Here's what the son said.
Absolutely not. I think it was the maximum right before using lethal force, because they were beating on his head for 200 plus guys, 200 plus pound agents or whatever they were, beating a 5'7", 150-pound guy with no type of weapon. So no, I don't think it was the minimum amount, and I don't think they handled it professionally.
And And he says, Hallie, that the reason the weed whacker was there was it was his father's landscaping business, and he was trying to basically defend himself, not hurl it at anyone. And he says the first thing his father said when he called him from detention was to tell him he was okay, to ask him to go finish the job that he started at someone's home, and to make sure his gear and his truck were safely packed away.
I'm glad you had a chance to talk to the Sun, because there's been a lot of attention around this incident. And part of what DHS said in response to this, Julia, was that, you know, assaults against law enforcement, against our law enforcement officers and teams and agents are up. We also saw the agents in that video masked in baseball caps. That's becoming more and more common, right?
Yeah, not only is it becoming more and more common, people I talk to, ICE officers, former ICE agents, say it's unprecedented. Basically, they would have never used that kind of disguise when going out to arrest someone. They wanted people to know who they were. That way, there wouldn't be assaults. And they said, frankly, if someone were to chase them dressed in the same garb, they would also put up a fight, because there are some cases where you think you might be getting kidnapped.
They were wearing some kind of insignia.
Now, sometimes it might just say police, but then, of course, you do have vigilantes who couldn't in that case. In some cases that we've seen try to pretend to be some kind of police. It's a really confusing, chaotic time right now. The Sun said that his father knew it was a risk every day when he went to work, that he could possibly be picked up. I don't think this is exactly how he expected this to unfold, though, Hallie. And so, yes, his assaults are up, but I think the question here is, are the tactics escalating in a way that people feel they have to fight back and defend themselves?
Julia Ainsley, thank you very much for reporting this out for us tonight. Appreciate it. When we come back, another live report from overseas and a region on edge. We're going to take you to Tel Aviv. Plus, former CIA and defense advisor Jeremy Bash joins us on where he thinks all of this is going next. Tonight's big story, the Iranian retaliatory strikes on a U.S. airbase in Qatar. In just the last half hour, we're learning the Israeli military is now warning Iranians in a part of Tehran to evacuate again. Two U.S. defense officials tell our team it's not even clear whether the missiles you see here from Iran actually even hit that base just 40 minutes outside Doha, with President Trump describing the attack as, in his words, very weak. Those defense officials also say that no other U.S. bases in the region were targeted. I want to bring in Matt Bradley, who is live for us in Tel Aviv. And Matt, as we've talked about throughout the show tonight, this is about the U.S., it is about Iran, it is about Israel, it is about others in the region as well. So as we get this warning from Israel, another one to tell people in a certain part of Tehran to evacuate or to shelter, help us understand some of the dynamics at play as we head into tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Hallie. What we're seeing here is a slow shift in Israel's targeting. What we saw over the past 10 days was, for the most part, nuclear facilities that were being struck, and these anti-air Iranian anti-air facilities, and these ballistic missile launch pads. And now the Israelis have referred to this as missile hunting. But there have also been a shift over the past couple of days as the Israelis tend to be targeting now symbols of the regime, like some of the state television stations that we've seen, and also Evin Prison, that notorious place where so many political prisoners have been held, and some of the internal security services, offices that belong to the security apparatus that holds the regime together inside Iran. Now, this is telling, because we've also been hearing more and more from the Israelis flecking at this notion that they might be encouraging regime change in Iran as the regime sort of crumbles to its knees in real time. We also heard President Donald Trump last night also mentioning the notion of regime change, though not openly endorsing it, kind of opening the window to it. So we're starting to see that shift, and that really reveals that the Israelis are kind of pushing in that direction.
You've also got some new reporting about the role that Iran's neighbors in the region are playing here, right?
Yeah, or the lack of it, Hallie. I mean, the fact is that we haven't really seen a lot of these Arab countries neighboring Iran rise to Iran's defense, even as the U.S. has been pummeling those nuclear sites. Now, when Donald Trump said the other day that Iran is the bully of the Middle East, a lot of Arabs in the region would probably think that's pretty rich. They would say that the U.S. is the bully of the Middle East. But you could sort of see heads nodding in a lot of the halls of power, particularly in the Gulf countries, where they really see Iranian expanding influence and its proxy groups throughout the region as a major force for destabilization. And it's one of the reasons why you can see it in the statements. When Iran attacked just tonight that U.S. base Al Udeid in Qatar, we saw statements of condemnation from all around the Gulf. when the U.S. attacked Iran's nuclear sites, we saw statements of concern.
Matt Bradley, live for us there in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you for your reporting. I know it's been a long 72 hours for you as well. Appreciate that. Let me bring in Jeremy Bash now, our NBC News analyst, former chief of staff at the Department of Defense and at the CIA. Jeremy, glad to have you with us. Thank you.
Great to be here.
So listen, a couple of the things that we've been talking about since really Saturday night when the U.S. Struck those Iranian nuclear facilities, 3 of those sites here. The U.S. made clear at the time and in the hours after that that was intended essentially to be one and done, right? Intentionally limited to those nuclear sites, despite what the president then floated about regime change. Iran now, with this retaliatory strike today, is now suggesting or indicating that they intend that to be fairly limited, right? That if the U.S. doesn't hit again, that is, at least kinetically, militarily, that's what they're going to do, you know, keep it contained to what we saw at Al Udeid Air Base. So then the questions are cyber. What does Iran do on that front? The questions are, what does Israel do? And do they continue to escalate in Iran? The questions are, what about that enriched uranium in the first place? Where did it go? Where did Iran move it to? What else is on your list of big questions that you have as we now head into Monday night and the rest of the week?
Yeah, I think you're right, Hallie. So to take each one, first, with respect to Iran's retaliation, they're going to need to find asymmetric ways to retaliate against the United States and Israel. They're not going to be able to launch a force-on-force, strategic, calculus-changing military response. They don't have the capability. They've been disabled, and they can't really touch us. They could fire some missiles at our air bases, and that's, by the way, very dangerous and very escalatory. I don't want to minimize it and call it merely symbolic when a ballistic missile is aiming at U.S. troops, but it is a pretty weak response. I agree with the president on that. So they're going to look for cyber. They're going to look for terrorism. They're going to look to arm the Houthis. They might try to reconstitute other terrorist proxies like those in Iraq or Syria or even Hezbollah again. They may try to activate sleeper cells or assassins working in the United States targeting U.S. officials. They're going to have to try something asymmetric. With respect to Israel, I think they don't want to waste this crisis. I think they want to continue to disable as much of the ballistic missile capability that Iran has so that Iran cannot threaten Israel with its missiles, because Israel's air defenses were only about 90% accurate. I say only. Of course, it's very effective, but still 10% of them got through, and we've seen the destruction from the streets of Tel Aviv. But with respect to that key question about battle damage assessment, kind of did Operation Midnight Hammer do what it set out to do? I think, Hallie, this is going to be one of the most consequential and complicated and contentious BDA assessments that the intelligence community will ever have to undertake. Every single centrifuge, every single stockpile of uranium will have to be analyzed. What's its status? What's its operational status? How quickly can it be reconstituted? And it's going to present a very complicated picture. We're going to have to listen to the communications of Iranians talking to themselves. They may not be telling each other the truth. They may not be briefing the real case up to the supreme leader. So the information we get, both directly and from our liaison partners, is going to have to be carefully analyzed and scrutinized.
And just to talk about the scope of that, we're talking about something like nearly 900 pounds, right, of highly enriched uranium. We're talking about something like 19,000 centrifuges reportedly that Iran is believed to have, right? The scope of that is enormous.
Totally. Exactly. I mean, I can imagine a report that says centrifuges 1 through 30 are in a 57% operational state, centrifuges 31 through 75 are in a 90% operational state. You know, this part of the stockpile has been degraded. This part of the stockpile is usable. This part of the stockpile is hidden. We don't know where it is. It's going to be a very kind of complicated assessment. And only through that analysis, which I think is going to take days, weeks, maybe months, will we gain a picture of whether Iran will be able to reconstitute its nuclear capability. I mean, the president said we have obliterated these sites. Maybe we've taken these sites offline for the foreseeable future, but Iran still has that know-how. And I think the U.S., Israel, our allies and partners are going to have to remain vigilant. In some ways, one and done. I don't think so. I think we're going to have to stay on top of this, continue to posture our forces ready for retaliation, and maybe even strike again if we see Iran trying to bury and disaggregate their program from here.
So then, given what you have just laid out, Jeremy, can we even answer the question of whether the strikes on those nuclear facilities Saturday night was worth the risk?
It's going to be all in the shouting. I mean, many people will argue it was because it will have set Iran back. It will have established military deterrence. It will have made clear to the Iranian regime that we mean business. President Trump had 3 options probably presented to him, small, medium, and large. He went large. I mean, 14 stealth bombers with their mops, going into the heart of Iran. That's a huge package. But obviously others will say, wait a minute, though, they still can build a nuclear weapon if they put their mind to it, and we're going to have to find ways to cut them off of the pass.
So then quickly, Jeremy, when it comes to those other sort of options that Iran could consider asymmetrically that you brought up, the issue of cyber, for example, these quote-unquote sleeper cells or lone wolf attacks that they may try to do in the U.S., although they've been unsuccessful to this point in recent years. What do you see as the riskiest option, the likeliest option? What should we be thinking about on that front?
Most of our critical infrastructure, our water systems, our electrical systems, our financial systems are in the hands of the private sector. We need strong capabilities, products, technologies fueled by AI to kind of detect those threats and counter the efforts by Iran and others. They may work with Russia. They may work with China. They may work with North Korea to field cyber attacks against our critical infrastructure, which is where we are most vulnerable.
Jeremy Bash, thank you very much. We're glad to have your expertise with us tonight. Appreciate you joining us. Coming up after the break, we'll get to some other headlines, too, including the waning days of the Diddy trial that seem to be upon us. Jurors there shown graphic videos of those so-called freak-offs. Why Diddy's defense thinks that's going to help their case. Next. We are getting to the final days of Diddy's sex trafficking trial in New York, with the prosecution set to rest its case tomorrow and the defense saying it plans to rest without calling any witnesses. Today in court, you had jurors seeing graphic and explicit videos of Sean Combs and one of his ex-girlfriends, who's gone by the pseudonym Jane, through this trial. The media was not allowed to see what was shown on those videos that were presented by the defense, but it appears that the intention was to show Jane was a willing participant in those marathon sex performances known as freak-offs. Diddy is facing sex trafficking and racketeering charges. He has pleaded not guilty, and his legal team says all the sexual encounters he had were consensual. Chloe Malas has more from New York.
Hey there, Hallie. Well, the big news is that Sean Combs' defense team, they are not calling any witnesses. This is very different from what we had heard from Mark Agnifilo, Combs' lead defense attorney, just a couple weeks ago, that they planned to have about a week or week and a half case. Then it turned into about a 2 to 3 day case. And now no witnesses at all. So we are expecting tomorrow the prosecution to rest their case in the morning. The jury is going to have a lunch break. Then they're going to come back. And what we're going to see is Combs' legal team entering different stipulations, some different evidence that they have. And then that's it. Wednesday is when we're going to see something called a charging conference. This is very important. That's where a lot of information comes out as to what exactly the jury is going to get, all that paperwork when they go into the deliberating room, because they're going to be looking at something like RICO conspiracy, and there are predicate crimes, everything from sex trafficking, arson, witness tampering, and they have to see if the government has met the burden of proof on at least 2 of those predicate crimes to prove RICO conspiracy. Then you move to sex trafficking, there's 2 counts. Then you obviously have the 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Then on Thursday is when closing arguments begin, but then that's going to spill over into Friday morning, and then the jury is actually going to begin deliberating on Friday. So it would be very unlikely that the jury, given all of these counts and all of this copious information, that they would be done on Friday, but in theory, that could be a real scenario. And, again, it's been about 7 weeks, right, by the time that this week is over, and you can imagine that they're going to want to try to have a decision before the 4th of July next week. But again, really big news today that Combs' team, that they're not calling any witnesses. Hallie?
Chloe Malas, thank you very much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a state of emergency in Greece now as wildfires spread on one of the islands there. It's super windy, so that means this is spreading very fast, with power outages, evacuations, and officials say they're looking into this as potential arson. Number 2, a big recall from Ford, nearly 200,000 cars because of an issue that could trap passengers in the back seat. Officials say it could pose a big risk to kids in particular. We're talking about the Mustang Mach-E cars made between February 2020 and June of this year. Ford says dealerships can fix the problem for free. No reports so far of anybody getting hurt. Number 3, take a look at this. A bunch of protesters in Venice today demonstrating against the upcoming wedding of Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez there. You can see this poster. It says, if you can rent Venice for your wedding, you can pay more tax. Greenpeace is also joining the so-called No Space for Bezos movement, arguing it's an example of the government prioritizing tourism over the needs of people who actually live there. Number 4, Dolly Parton heading to Vegas for her first concert series there in decades. She hasn't toured anywhere for years now, but she announced this mini residency. It's only 6 shows later this year at Caesars. Number 5, Jalen Hurts, now officially an author of a children's book as well. The Super Bowl champion Eagles QB says it's always been a dream of his and that he hopes this book will encourage resilience. It's called Better Than a Touchdown. It comes out next March. You can bet it'll be a staple in a lot of households that are fans of the Super Bowl champion, best in the world, Philadelphia Eagles. Still ahead, we're going to take you over to Congress, not too far from where we're sitting now, which has played virtually zero role in America's fight with Iran so far. Whether that may change, and the latest from both Democrats and Republicans next. Back now from Washington, we'll take you right over to the Capitol, where there's some growing pressure from some on the Hill for the White House to do more, to give them more answers, to give them more transparency about what has happened in Iran. Here's the House Democratic leader just before he came on the air.
The use of military force, which is offensive in nature, must be approved by the House and the Senate. That's according to the Constitution. That Gang of 8 briefing has not taken place. So the question is, why not? What is the administration hiding?
I want to go to NBC's Mel Zanona, who is live on the Hill for us. As members, as lawmakers, representatives, senators make their way back to the Hill now, the White House is required to, at some point, notify members of Congress, right, key members of Congress, about a strike like the one they took Saturday night. Do we know if that's happened yet, Mel?
Yeah, our sources are telling us that there has been an official notification as required by law. And we're also told that the leadership did get a heads up prior to the strikes on Saturday, but there were varying degrees of how much information and how much notice some of these congressional leaders actually got, depending on which party they belong to. And I think the bigger picture here, Hallie, is that Congress is not being consulted. Certainly, Trump did not seek any formal authorization from Congress, so they've been largely left out of the loop, which is why some Democrats are saying that is unconstitutional and why they are pushing for something called a war powers resolution that essentially would block further intervention in Iran without explicit approval from Congress. But Republicans are mostly lining up behind Donald Trump. And I caught up with Speaker Johnson earlier today to ask him about all of this and where he stands. Here's what he had to say.
The Commander-in-Chief has Article 2 responsibilities. They're very serious and important, especially in times like this. I think he used that authority judiciously. I don't think this is an appropriate time for a war powers resolution, and I don't think it's necessary.
And Johnson did get a classified briefing this morning on the situation on Iran, but the full House and the full Senate won't get their full briefing until tomorrow, Hallie.
To your point, most Republicans have certainly fallen behind President Trump on this one. You heard it there from House Speaker Mike Johnson, save for one, a name that may not be super familiar to people outside Kentucky, and that's Congressman Thomas Massie, who the White House, who the president himself have gone after hard over the course of the last 24 hours because he does back that War Powers Act, right?
Yeah, we've seen them going back and forth. Trump already threatening to back a primary challenger to Massie, saying, get this bum out of office ASAP. But Massie has long been a thorn in the side of leadership.
That's right.
Hallie, the more surprising voice would be Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's one of Trump's biggest champions on Capitol Hill. And she has been going on a tirade against these Iran strikes, calling it a complete bait and switch. But then she also went out of her way to tweet that MTG hearts DJT. So clearly not wanting to fuel the narrative that there's some significant split between her and the president.
Mel Zanona live for us on the Hill. Mel, thank you very much. That's a wrap for this hour. Thank you, as always, for watching. We've got more coverage picking up right now. We are coming on the air with what may be an off-ramp for now for President Trump, with the first we're hearing from him about those retaliatory strikes today from Iran. You see it here, those missiles in the sky over Qatar. As the president suggests, this could be the end of it, at least for now. He wants to see peace. We're going to take you live to the White House with what that means. Plus, we're live in the Middle East with more on that escalating back and forth between Israel and Iran. and a new look at those B-2 bombers that struck Iranian nuclear sites. You can see it taken off there. There's some night vision video, too. But how effective were those attacks in the first place, and where is the enriched uranium now? We're getting into all of it. Plus, what all of it might mean for your money and for oil prices, too. Why Wall Street at this point doesn't seem to be too worried. Plus, our team goes one-on-one with a U.S. Marine veteran who says his dad was brutally attacked by Border Patrol agents in California. How he's responding to what the feds are saying about his father, who's now in federal detention. And that monster heat wave melting millions of us across the country right now. When the soup will stop simmering later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and in just the last couple of hours, it seems we may be getting an answer to the question the world has been waiting for, at least for now, after Iran's retaliatory strikes on a U.S. base. Will President Trump retaliate in return? Will he escalate again? It sounds like the answer to that may be no, at least not for the moment, as the president tells the world it is time for peace in a new Truth Social post, his online platform, in just the last couple of hours. Of course, the question now, is this it? Is there going to be more after the scene that you are looking at here? The Iranian retaliatory strike, missiles over Qatar, targeting the Al Udeid Air Force Base, just about 40 minutes outside Doha. It's tough to see, but obviously you see those red dots flying through the air. Those are the missiles getting intercepted in most instances there. Something like 5,000 U.S. troops. It's a huge, the biggest base that the U.S. has in the Middle East. 2 U.S. defense officials say the attacks from Iran were intercepted. It's not even clear whether the base itself was hit at all. And President Trump confirms nobody died, nobody was hurt. And he even says Iran gave early warning that the attack was coming. So then you might ask, okay, well, was this really the most muscle that Iran could flex here? Or was this just enough muscle to show a domestic audience that Iran did something? Because it would have been virtually impossible for Iran to do nothing after those U.S. strikes Saturday on its 3 nuclear sites. Attacks carried out by U.S. B-2 bombers. We're now getting this new look at the actual jets, the actual bombers that participated in the attack. This is coming in from the Pentagon here in just the last hours, couple of hours. So you see it's over June 20th to the 22nd from that Air Force base in Missouri, where they made that round trip from 30-plus hours. One of the sites that these bombers hit with those massive so-called bunker buster bombs, Fordo. You can see the before and after of some of these from satellite. Remember, Fordo, deep underground. It's really, really heavily fortified. You can clearly see some of the craters in the before and after and some holes where those bombs essentially tried to tunnel down. But all of this brings us to some of the big questions tonight, including just how badly that site, the 2 others, were damaged. First of all, as we've said, is this it? President Trump says the Iranians have gotten it all out of their system. Is that actually the case? What about the highly enriched uranium that was being held, it's believed, at those nuclear sites? Were the U.S. strikes on the sites actually effective? Where is that uranium now? Nobody can go in and independently assess the damage. So what do we really know about that? And does all of this talk of peace that the president's promising tonight, when he says it's time for peace, does that extend to Israel, too? What does Israel do next, as they have even issued new warnings tonight about attacks on Tehran? We've got it all covered from Washington to the region, but we start tonight in Erbil, Iraq, where our chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, is joining us. Keir, talk us through what you're hearing on the ground there, given what is continuing to be a pivotal moment here.
Yeah, Hallie, we're about 2 hours from the border of Iran here, and from inside Iran, while you were speaking there, we're getting reports of loud, large explosions in Tehran and other parts of Iran. So just as you were talking about President Trump saying it's time for peace, maybe we were hearing, at least in the short term, Israel's answer to that, continuing its bombing campaign, it seems, across Iran, determined to target Iran's nuclear program and maybe the regime itself. Earlier today, they targeted a notorious prison, Evan prison in Iran. It's a place where political prisoners have been held. People have emerged with stories of torture. Some have never emerged at all. The Israelis, to put it this way, just blew the doors off. Now, the Iranians say that no prisoners escaped, but you don't hit a prison unless you're trying to destabilize the Iranian regime. And the Israelis seem determined to continue despite that attack by Iran on Qatar. Those missiles would have flown over us here. For a while there, Hallie, we wondered whether the American base that is just behind me there, you can see it twinkling in the distance here in Iraq, whether it would be targeted. In fact, what the Iranians did is just target the one base in Qatar, a base that's very well defended, in a country that they are more friendly with than some other countries here in the region, gave warning. People are talking about it as the Iranians putting on a show, but trying to de-escalate. But again, there are multiple actors in this. There is the US and the Trump administration. There is the Iranians, and then there's the Israelis.
So, Keir, I'm going to ask you to stand by for a second because as you were speaking, we got a significant piece of news from President Trump in a Truth Social post. I'm going to ask you to stand by. I'm going to let you look at your phone. I'm going to bring Yamiche in. We're getting Richard Engel as well because President Trump is announcing now online that there is going to be, he says, a complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Now, I want to be clear, as we have Yamiche here, we've got Richard, and Courtney Cuby's with us as well. The president says, I want to see if we can pull it up on screen here, that it has been fully agreed by these countries, Israel and Iran, that there will be a ceasefire in 6 hours from now, when he says they have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, and he says at which point the war will be considered ended. He goes on in this fairly lengthy Truth Social post that we're turning around. Again, this is coming in literally the last 90 seconds here. And Yamiche, I should note here, we do not have independent confirmation from Iran on this. We do not have independent confirmation from Israel on this. This is coming from the president himself, suggesting that there will be a ceasefire at some point later on tonight. I don't want to put you on the spot here. Do we have anything else on this yet from national security officials or folks that you've been talking to? Help us understand the president's mindset at this moment, as he is clearly looking to try to get to some kind of a truce in the region at the moment.
Yeah, well, this is, of course, a striking and really significant announcement that President Trump is making here, if this, of course, holds, which is the fact that he is saying that there's a ceasefire between now these two nations that have been in this confrontation that, of course, the United States then joined over the weekend. So if this ceasefire has actually been brokered, it would be significant. The other thing to note is that all day, while the president was saying that he was ready to fight back against Iran and any sort of retaliation that they might have, he was also messaging very clearly that he wanted this to not be an escalating conflict. In fact, he wanted to de-escalate. And earlier, he posted online that even though he saw Iran's retaliation as weak, he also said, thank you for the heads up. And he also said that he was going to be ensuring and encouraging Iran to have peace and also encouraging Israel to have peace, which I think is really significant because the president wasn't just saying that I want Iran to be peaceful moving forward. He was also saying he was going to be messaging to the Israelis. And of course, that being Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a close ally of President Trump. So this announcement, to me, is a big deal. We're going to, of course, be digging into it with White House officials. But the fact that the president is publicly saying this tells me that the president wants this to be happening and is hoping to take some credit here, because he's also been saying that it is the United States leadership that needed to sort of step in here, and that this was not a war. And let's remember that the vice president told Kristen Welker on Meet the Press that this was not a war against Iran. It was a war against its nuclear program. So I think all of this dovetails with what the president has been messaging all weekend.
Yamiche, thank you. I want to go back to Keir Simmons now. And Keir, again, I know that you had about 11 seconds to look at this because this was coming out as you've been live on the air. But the president goes on to suggest in this Truth Social that this is he describes it, again, from President Trump, an official end to what he describes as the 12-day war. And he says that Israel and Iran have both agreed to this here. As Yamiche points out, would obviously be significant given one of the biggest questions that we had up to this point, including after that Iranian retaliatory strike against the U.S. airbase, would be what does Israel do next? Does Israel, in fact, work to de-escalate as well?
Yeah, that's going to be a crucial question, actually. Hallie, as you were just talking to me there, I was just looking down at my phone because I'm just texting Israeli officials and Gulf officials, Gulf diplomats, to see whether they can shed any light on it. Just in real time right now, a Gulf official saying, we're watching and fascinated. So that means, translation, they don't know anything about it. They might not, clearly, since President Trump is talking about the potential deal between the Iranians and the Israelis, with obviously the Trump administration involved. As I mentioned at the top here, as President Trump is posting that, we're hearing about strikes in Iran. Now, the end of a war, I mean, we really have to be cautious here. We could...
That's right.
No... We can't say that's where we're at, but the closing hours of a war can often be the deadliest, the most bloody, the most dramatic, because both sides can attempt to try and gain as much advantage as possible before a ceasefire has to be imposed. But to be honest, until we hear from the Israeli military, the IDF, the Israeli Air Force, that they have been told to stand down, I'm not sure that we can say that there's a ceasefire. But the President of the United States is the President of the United States. So, you know, when he says this, and as Yamiche was suggesting, carries a lot of weight.
And I should note, too, and again, as we are in this developing coverage mode here, Keir, that the vice president is also talking about this now, suggesting that this is a new opportunity to pursue the path of peace for both Israel and Iran. To your very important point here, though, we have not heard, and we've said it, and we'll say it again, we have not heard independently from either Israel or Iran about this as well. To that point, I want to take you to Israel, because in Tel Aviv, we have our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who is joining us now. And Richard, you know, it is, to Keir's point, it is the President of the United States making this announcement about what he describes as a ceasefire that is not in effect at this moment. He seems to be nodding toward the operation that Israel is currently carrying out, at least did within the last hour in Tehran and elsewhere, but that is set to go into effect in the overnight hours, essentially.
I'm still trying to figure it out. He says in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. So is it 6 hours?
Right,
because
then he goes on to say, Iran starts it at the 12th hour or something. It's a little bit convoluted the way it's laid out here.
It is a little bit confusing. We haven't heard anything from the Israelis immediately. There's been no official statements. We're all trying to make some sense of this. Frankly, this is something that has been hinted at. The Iranian foreign minister, we were just talking last hour, said that if there are no more American attacks, there won't be any more Iranian attacks. We said and how that applied between a part of this conflict, which was the direct strikes between Iran and Israel, Iran and the United States. But we hadn't heard any talk of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. That was always the looming question here. How far will Israel push this? Will Israel step back from regime change, even as it now has been widening its targets? Today, we saw Israel expanding its targets list to attack the prison, to attack the domestic security services in Iran. Or these last licks, are the two sides going to step back from the brink? President Trump is saying that they are. Going back to Keir's point, what happens in these next 12 hours? Is it just free game? And what happens if there's many, many casualties on one side or the other? Is that acceptable? We're going to just sort of, everyone's just told to take that on the chin, bunker down for 12 hours? It is an announcement, not a lot of preparation. Maybe there's preparation that's going on in the background. But I will tell you that I've been speaking to very senior U.S. military and very senior Gulf diplomatic sources, and they were talking about some optimism about ceasefire. And I understand that, Keir, you have some new information.
For us, if you can hear me, I want to go now back to Keir Simmons.
Richard, I'll pick it up from there. Hallie.
Oh, Keir, I'm glad to have you. Thanks. I want to get to one of the points that we're talking about here, which is about this issue, regardless of these fast-moving developments between Israel and Iran. As we've noted, as Richard has pointed out, they are moving quickly. One thing that hasn't changed is this question around what the actual damage was to those nuclear facilities in Iran and where that enriched uranium actually is. That Iran says it had moved out of those nuclear sites, the highly enriched uranium that can't be used to make a bomb now, but that is obviously incredibly significant to its program moving forward.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised that question, Hallie, because it is a crucial question. And even more important at this moment, the questions that Richard was raising there about what happens in the next few hours, let's add to that the issue of what happens in the next weeks and months, because if this really is a ceasefire, what's the deal? What's the agreement? I mean, the fundamental sticking point roadblock, if you like. I mean, you know, the two sides, to use another metaphor, have been between a rock and a hard place. The fundamental question has been about will Iran agree to removing all of its nuclear capability? Will it agree to give up the enriched uranium, enriched at 60%? Now, for a nuclear weapon, you need 90%, but the physics of this is a little bit confusing, and it's actually quite a short distance between a 60% enriched uranium and a 90% or beyond. So that's what the Israelis have been saying this entire time, that they have been concerned that the Iranians would not have to do too much more work in order to get to that stage. They would then need also to turn that uranium into metal and to turn it into something that could be put on in a warhead. But again, the Israelis have been alleging through sources reported in newspapers like The Economist that, in fact, the Iranians were looking at being prepared to do that. Now, on the other side, U.S. intelligence has been suggesting, again through sources reported in news outlets, that in fact it does not assess that the Iranians were about to move that quickly to a nuclear weapon. And that may be partly because up until a week or so ago, the impression was that the Ayatollah of Iran, the supreme leader, had not decided that they would move to a nuclear weapon. That kind of confusion, that kind of different interpretations, that is still there. The uranium, the 60% uranium I was talking about there, that is still in Iran, and publicly at least, we don't know where it is. And that is a huge question, as you can imagine, because are the Iranians going to be able to agree a ceasefire and then keep that kind of radiological material and possibly hide it away and possibly begin some kind of a nuclear program that people are not aware of, that the UN watchdog is not aware of. Already the Israelis have been suggesting that the Iranians were doing something like that, even whilst putting some of what their radiological material in public view through that UN watchdog. So there are so many complexities here, so many questions. And for President Trump to say, OK, now there's a ceasefire without any negotiation, and that is going to raise a lot of eyebrows around the world, frankly, and not least in Israel. Now, if he can get a ceasefire, perhaps that is the moment when negotiations can begin. Perhaps that is the stage when, in fact, the two sides can get round the table and try and come to some kind of a compromise. The Iranians have been suggesting at times, some of them, some in that regime, that they would be prepared to agree to having nuclear material, radiological material, for a civil nuclear program, but not weapons grade. And that is not something, though, that the Israelis have been fond of, and not something in recent weeks and days that the Trump administration has been agreeing to, Hallie. So it really, there are so many things to figure out. And I think one of the crucial points here is that President Trump clearly, we know from it's widely reported, and from those around him, that he is somebody that would like to bring peace to conflict. He talks about it all of the time. But what kind of peace is it going to be? And how suspicious will, particularly the Israelis, be of the Iranian ambitions here and what they might be doing secretly? And all of that comes to this fundamental point. Well, if there is a ceasefire, how long will it last?
Kira, I know we may lose you at any moment, but I want to go to our colleague, Matt Bradley, who is also in Tel Aviv, who I understand has some new reporting on this. Matt, what do you know?
Well, we're just seeing this. I'm just parsing out this statement like the rest of us, Hallie. You know, it is confusing. One of the things that really turns me around here is that he says officially Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war. Clearly, President Trump sees this 12-day war as a successor to the 6-day war. So it looks as though, and I don't know any more than you do here, Hallie, but it looks as though Iran is going to stop firing And then 12 hours later, Israel will be enjoined to stop firing. And upon the 24th hour, both of them, or the war will be officially declared over. That almost makes it sound like Israel will have its way with Iran for a 12-hour period between the time when Iran starts its end of the ceasefire and then Israel picks up on its end, though he does say that during each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. It's confusing because, of course, you do think of a ceasefire as being a mutual agreement, not that one can have a ceasefire and the other unless one just simply ceases firing and the other is allowed to continue firing. That doesn't sound like much of a negotiated agreement. However, we're going to have to give President Trump the benefit of the doubt here. He's announcing a major, as Keir said, a major advancement here, even though it is kind of unclear how the mechanics of this are all supposed to work, especially if the Israelis are allowed to continue firing for 12 hours, already having dominance over Iranian airspace. But as Keir mentioned, the Israelis still have a lot of unfinished business, especially when it comes to that uranium that nobody knows where it's gone. So, right. I mean, it's unclear where this is all going to be going from here. It all starts 6 hours from now, according to the president. Again, we haven't heard anything from the Israelis. It's very late here, 1:30, so we might not hear anything. But it's going to be before dawn when this ceasefire actually starts, or around dawn. So this country is going to be experiencing quite a bit of whiplash in the next couple of hours. I can tell you that Israelis went to bed tonight thinking that they were going to be woken up by more sirens and more bombardments.
Matt Bradley, I'm going to ask you to stand by because, to your point, it is not just President Trump who is talking about this. It is now Vice President Vance as well. Yamiche, who is still with us outside the White House, he has just, I believe, finished speaking. What can you tell us about what the VP has to say?
Yeah, so as the president is making this striking announcement, and we're still waiting, of course, for confirmation from Israel and Iran, the vice president is essentially throwing his support behind this idea that this ceasefire agreement has been reached. And he said this is a great thing, as you said, for Israel and Iranians, a new opportunity to actually pursue what he called the path of peace. He also said that the 12-day war appears to be effectively over. That's exactly his words. He said we have an opportunity now to restart a real peace process. He went on to say that it's now that the Iranians who now need to play it smart from here. So to me, it's really interesting because as he's saying that this ceasefire has been breached and that the war is over, he's also signaling that Iran now has a decision to make about the way forward. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how Iran talks about this. It's also very interesting to get details, I think, about exactly how this ceasefire was brokered. We know that the president was talking to both sides, that he spent all day in the Situation Room talking to his top defense officials and top aides about this, and that he was in the middle of negotiations. The vice president is essentially saying that there was the president in the middle of this all day that allowed this ceasefire to be brokered. Of course, that is the Trump administration stance. Still waiting to see how, of course, the other two countries that are involved here categorize this and talk about this. But it is interesting that the vice president is now out publicly saying that this 12-day war is effectively over. Hallie?
Yamiche, thank you. Let me bring in our national security reporter, Dan DeLuce, who's joining me now here on set. To Yamiche's point about the discussions, we know based on public statements from top Trump administration officials, there were direct and indirect talks with Iran. Obviously, there is a close and clear open line to Israel as well. And there are several Trump advisors who have played a key role in, we don't know if they played a key role in the ceasefire. We can assume that, but certainly in those discussions.
That's right. So there have been communications throughout this whole time. And in NBC's interview the other day with the Iranian foreign minister, he said, we are still exchanging messages. We're not negotiating, but we're communicating. And the key person in that has been, it appears, Steve Witkoff, who is the presidential envoy who seems to get all the big jobs, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the situation in Gaza. Now, those discussions previously, before all of this, didn't succeed, right? So they could not come to agreement on Iran's nuclear program. If this holds, if this ceasefire holds, this is very good news for Iran at some level, right? Because they're getting pummeled. Their air defenses are a mess. They've lost control of their airspace. And so the sooner the ceasefire happens, the better for Iran. They need to take a breath. They need to regroup. And for Israel, they've had the upper hand, but obviously at some point they start running out of air defense system interceptors and so on. It's putting a strain on them. They're obviously also taking some civilian casualties. So there was a common interest to end it somehow. But we still don't know so much about exactly how this was agreed, what was agreed, and how long it might last, and whether Israel might say, oh, we've got a bomb again because we believe that there is some kind of suspicious nuclear activity going on that we've got to take care of. So that's another question going forward. Will President Trump have the ability to call his counterpart in Israel and say, you're not bombing in Iran again. That's over now. We're going to have peace now.
One of the things that's important to this, Dan, I'm going to ask you to stand by here, is, and we've touched on this a bit earlier in the broadcast, but Keir Simmons, let me bring you in on this, the domestic political pressures for each of these leaders here that are involved in this incredibly complicated geopolitical situation, Keir, in the Middle East, right? Because you've got, obviously, Iran needing to present this sort of strong presence, if you will, this flexing of military muscle to its audience at home. You have Israel, you have Netanyahu under immense pressure domestically in Israel as well. Help us understand some of those dynamics in this moment.
Yeah, you know, Hallie, I was looking down there while you were talking to me because, as I mentioned earlier, I've been texting with officials and diplomats and that I know, you know, across the region. And I'll just tell you that I am told by an official with knowledge that there has been some kind of a negotiation involving the U.S. and Qatar. And you heard Dan there talking about Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, that has got us to this point. That's as much as I have right now from one source. But it's interesting if that is how the story evolves, if you like, I mean, the story of what's happening here as opposed to the actual developments. Because, of course, what we've seen tonight is the Iranians fire missiles at Qatar, at a U.S. base in Qatar, but give them advance notice.
That's right.
And all of those missiles get shot down. And now the possibility that the Qataris have been working with the Trump administration to get to a stage where they could have President Trump announce, apparently, that there will be a ceasefire. Now, again, caveat, we don't know. I'll just tell you one other, just as a way of presenting a caveat, Hallie. I'm talking to sources in the Israeli military. I'm not getting from them that they know anything about this at this stage. Maybe at a higher ranking level they do. Trying to talk to a source in the Israeli Prime Minister's office, no response. So this is a fast-moving story, but it looks as if maybe in the process of the Iranians threatening and then taking some action in the past hours, that there were also talks that may have led to this announcement by President Trump. Certainly, the Iranians, I think, are feeling that they would like to get out of this. Let's be honest, their whole strategy over years has been, and everyone will know this because we've talked about it so much now, has been to use proxies, to use other groups like here in Iraq to attack Israel. In this process, they have effectively been dragged into, many will say, have got themselves into a war with Israel. That's not what their strategy was. And so you can understand why they may want to be trying to find an off-ramp. It's also possible to understand why the Trump administration may be wanting to find an off-ramp. President Trump is somebody who openly espouses peace and talks about really just wanting a ceasefire. That's what he's talked about continually, for example, with Russia and Ukraine. Again, though, back to my earlier point, we're waiting really to understand what the Israelis think of all this. And if you just think about Israel and Gaza and the Qataris and the US and all of those negotiations, we've had many moments where it looks like we're close to a ceasefire, only for it to fall apart on the detail and for many sides to realize that while they agree they would prefer to stop fighting, they don't agree on much else.
Keir, I'm going to let you keep working the phones. I'm going to ask you to stay as close to your camera for as long as we can get you, as this is moving incredibly quickly, because Matt Bradley President Trump in this announcement, again, coming on this online Truth Social post, in this announcement, was careful to say that the ceasefire would not begin for a number of hours yet, for at least 6 hours, while he says the countries finish their in-progress missions. And it sounds like even at this hour, 6:30 Eastern here in the U.S., we are still hearing explosions in Iran, right?
That's right. A new news agency affiliated with Iranian state security posted just minutes before President Trump's post announcing this ceasefire that there were still bombs landing over Tehran. Now, I've been reaching out to the IDF, to sources in the Prime Minister's office here in Israel. Nobody has said anything about the veracity of what President Trump said, but we could believe this because the fact is that the Israelis' modus operandi, whenever they have these things, is to also continue firing right up until the moment when the ceasefire happens. I was in Lebanon last year, and we saw just that. The Israelis pushed for position in the moments before the ceasefire was imposed on them, continued shooting, continued taking up positions because they wanted the best, most advantageous position once the guns fell silent. Once the music stopped, the Israelis want to have a chair to sit in. So this is one of the things that we could be seeing over Iran. But again, it's 6 hours. And again, going back to that confusing, text that the president put up, it sounds as though the Israelis could enjoy 12 full hours where they wouldn't necessarily be seeing any Iranian counterattacks if the president's description of this deal is accurate. I'm probably more confused than what I actually read because I don't believe that any deal would give the Israelis full reign and not have to cease firing while the Iranians would have to hold their guns. But it might not even matter because we've been hearing from the Israelis day after day for the past several days that they enjoy complete air supremacy over Western Iran and over the capital of Tehran. So it sounds as though as far as the Israelis are concerned, they can fly their jets in over Tehran and over Western Iran and simply loiter, hang out there for as long as they need, and they won't expect to get any incoming fire. Same with the Americans. They said that they didn't get any incoming fire when they lofted their jets over Iran when they delivered that devastating payload on those 3 nuclear sites just 2 days ago. So, maybe we won't see a lot of more fighting in the next couple of hours. But if we start to see more bombardments here in Tel Aviv, which we have every single night for the past 10 days, we might have an indication as to whether or not the president was actually speaking about a deal that both sides had agreed on. Right. But he seemed very resolute. He said this is going to be the end of the war, the end of the 12-day war. Even President Trump, I'm not sure he would have gone that far in a public statement like that unless he had it nailed down, but I could be surprised.
Matt, stand by for a second. Let me go to Dan DeLuz because as you're seeing, this is the video earlier from just outside Doha, essentially, on the left side of your screen, of the Iranian strikes earlier today, the retaliatory strike against the Al Udeid air base that's about 40 minutes outside Doha in Qatar. No injuries reported, no deaths reported from those strikes. It's not even clear whether any of those Iranian missiles actually struck the base in the first place. You're also seeing now, bottom of your screen, it's a map of the region we're talking about here. And what's important to note is if, in fact, there is a ceasefire, as President Trump says there is, between Israel and Iran, which would be obviously hugely significant, does that then open the door for inspectors, for independent inspectors to come in on the Iranian nuclear program, Dan? Because that is what the underpinning to all of this. That's why the president undertook these strikes, he says, in the first place. That's right. Huge question. And if they're not allowed in again, if Iran says, no, we've had it with this, right, we're not playing that game anymore, then we have no eyes on their uranium enrichment. We have no idea exactly what they're doing with their program. And they still have centrifuges left, experts say. And, of course, there's the question that you talked about earlier about where is this enriched uranium stockpile? And so that also leads to another question, which is what is Israel expecting here? Because an unconditional ceasefire that doesn't have any conditions attached to it in terms of Iran's nuclear program and activities, that's probably going to be pretty hard for Israel to swallow. Like, we've just bombed them to try to destroy their program, and now there's not going to be international inspections. Iran isn't going to have any kind of commitments or undertakings. Dan, I want to quickly go to Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, speaking now. Let's go there live.
We haven't seen this in a while, and it's really a big sigh of relief here on Capitol Hill. We certainly hope and pray and trust that Iran will end its nuclear enrichment program. They'll heed the calls of the rest of the world, and that we can have peace in the Middle East and peace in Israel. It's a really, really big day, historic.
When will you expect to be getting a briefing on all of this?
Well, we were set to have a briefing tomorrow afternoon, and so it'll be a little different in its tone, I suspect now. But just a great day. I think this should be something that every elected official here in both parties should applaud and be thankful for. So we're excited.
Do you think the War Powers Resolution will still come to the floor?
It's kind of a moot point now, isn't it? But if they file it as a privileged resolution, it's supposed to be on the floor within 15 days. But it seems rather silly at this point, and I hope they'll acknowledge it as such and put it to bed, because it had zero chance of passage anyway.
Do you expect a reconciliation that we're going to be here next week, given the timeline that the Senate has of possibly voting on it Thursday?
Well, Leader Thune and I are both intent on keeping that July 4th deadline, and I expect that they will move the bill through their chamber this week, and we will get it done on time if that's the case. So that's our intent.
Do you think a ceasefire deal can hold? Do you have faith that the Iranians are acting in good faith by entering?
Ronald Reagan said trust but verify, but it certainly seems like a good indication. I think the stakes are too high and they're in too much of a weakened position to be playing games with this, so we're going to take it at face value, and I certainly hope it's true.
Sir, how confident are you that the pilots were able to hit their target and achieve the goal that they had in striking Iran?
It was remarkable precision. It was planned and executed so well. We have the most capable military in the world, and this is a great indication, another example of that. I think that sent an important signal to the world, and I think obviously we all can extrapolate from the facts here and understand that was the reason that this is being resolved. It will be called the 12-day war, I suppose. That's what we're nicknaming it already, and just a remarkable turn of events. So let's hope that this is this historic, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we would all experience to truly have peace in the Middle East. That's what the people there deserve and they yearn for, even the Iranian people. And we hope that all comes about. So, thanks.
You have been listening there to House Speaker Mike Johnson. Mel Zanona, you saw her, our Capitol Hill correspondent, talking with him. Mel, I think you can hear me now. We missed the very top of that. Had the House Speaker been briefed by the White House, by the president, or was he basing his remarks off of that Truth Social post?
It sounded to me, Hallie, like he had not been personally briefed by the president. I do know that this morning, though, he told us earlier today that he had received a classified briefing on Iran. The House and Senate are also due to get a full briefing tomorrow, so I suspect Congress will be getting more information. But as you heard there, the Speaker reacting in real time to this news of a ceasefire. He was also asked, are you confident that this will hold? And he said, yes, this is a 12-day war. It's a great moment for our nation. So, in the Speaker's own words, a huge sigh of relief here on Capitol Hill, because this is an issue that had split the Republican Party, split the Democratic Party in some ways. There was talk of a War Powers resolution that was going to come to the floor to try to prevent further Iranian intervention by the United States. Unclear if that's still going to come up. I suspect, though, that some of these Republican outliers, like Thomas Massie, for example, a Republican who had been pushing that War Powers resolution, he might still want some assurances that in case things go sideways again, that there is going to be some congressional approval, because Congress really has been out of the loop. And the fact that it appeared, at least based on the conversation we just had with Johnson, that he was basing his reactions on the public news, it just shows how out of the loop Congress has been throughout this entire process, whether that is the decision making, whether it's the notification leading up to the events, the transparency around it, or the briefing involving what the decision making is going to be. But for now, just a big relief here on Capitol Hill.
Mel Zanona, great work corralling House Speaker Mike Johnson and getting that real-time reaction to this news now from President Trump that we've been reporting on over the course of the last 38 minutes, 35 minutes or so, that the president says there is a ceasefire that will take place in the overnight hours between Israel and Iran. Again, at this point, still no confirmation. I'm just checking our notes here. Still no confirmation from Israeli sources, from Iranian sources, that this is, in fact, what they have agreed to. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, here. And, Richard, while the House Speaker says that they are taking a sigh of relief, it is not at all clear that where you are in the region, they are doing the same, at least not yet, given so many of the questions that surround this.
No, it seems like you're taking the victory lap before achieving the victory, because even in this somewhat cryptic Truth Social post, President Trump describes this conflict continuing through the course of the night, that there'll be a 6-hour period and then a 12-hour period in which then another 12-hour period, and that it should be over within the next 24 hours. So this time on this show tomorrow, if this holds, we should be back on air together saying that there is a ceasefire in place. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. We will do that. Let's try and have a date tomorrow. We'll be back on air. If this ceasefire holds 24 hours from now, then we'll know. But no, there has been no response from the Israelis, no response from the Iranians. But I am hearing optimism from very senior U.S. military official saying that now it's time, the time has arrived and that they're going back to negotiations. And this is a very senior military official. I'm hearing from a mediator who's involved directly in this process, saying that after what happened today, it's time to get back to negotiations, and that is happening. So if we can get through this night and the last licks, and that's the way this Truth Social post somewhat described them, that the missions in operation will continue. If we can get through these missions that are in operation and not have a total breakdown, we will see if this phase of what he called the 12-day war, or let's say this 12-day war, is truly over. But no reaction here. I think people are still trying to figure it out and nervous as to what happens over the next 24-hour period. Yeah. Does that mean the Israelis are going to keep doing their attacks, but with a little bit more restraint? Will the Iranians keep doing their attacks with more restraint? I don't know. I haven't been in a situation like this where you've announced peace before peace has broken out. And peace is such a fragile thing. Ceasefires are such a fragile thing. It is possible because this was a war of choice. The Iranians are in a very weak position. The Israelis started it as a preemptive war against Iran's nuclear program. Its nuclear facilities have been attacked. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has wanted this for a long time. So you can stop a war of choice more easily than a war of aggression or a civil war where you can't just sort of announce it's over and pretend that everything is going to go well. So this, as wars go, you could stop this one if the Israelis and the Iranians have been told, dial it back. Iran told it doesn't need to prove anything more. It's not going to, there's not going to be regime change. Its leaders won't be targeted anymore. And Israel feels satisfied that it delivered a knockout blow or something close to a knockout blow with U.S. assistance to Iran's nuclear program. But this will be a very unusual night in the Middle East.
You're taking the words out of my mouth, Richard, because I was going to ask you, of the many unusual things you've described here, I do think it's worth noting. And while those of us who cover the first Trump term, who cover this Trump term, know that the president often posts things online, whether it's Twitter, X, Truth Social these days, he does that. That is still, in and of itself, an unusual way to announce something as potentially consequential as this, particularly when the partners involved or the other entities involved, like Israel and Iran, are not also, I think, coming to the forefront to make this announcement simultaneously. That is also not typically something that we would see in a situation that is anything but typical.
Yes and no. Often in conflicts, when the two sides truly hate each other that much, they can't dignify the other side by acknowledging their existence, and you have a ceasefire announced by a third-party mediator. That's not unusual. But what is unusual that he's saying is it's over. The whole thing is going to be over within 24 hours. They're just getting their last licks. We will see. We will see. He's announcing unilaterally the start of a ceasefire within the next 6 hours, and then another phase of that for the next sort of 12 hours. So the following 6 hours. So the first 12 hours should see the cessation of hostilities. It is now just around midnight here. So we're talking around 1 o'clock in the morning, I should say, here. So we're talking really about the next 12-hour period that the hostilities should be over. And then by the time we're back on air tonight, if it hasn't kicked up again, then I think you can say that, yes, this ceasefire did, in fact, take place, and his post was correct, and this 12-day campaign ended. it's a risky move to announce success that a ceasefire is going to hold ahead of time. But like I said, it is a war of choice. Iran did respond. It doesn't have much more capability to respond. So there is a real possibility that the two sides could walk away. So it might work, is what I'm trying to say, because of the nature of this war. I've just never seen it done this way before.
Richard Engel, live for us in the region. Richard, I know you're staying up. You're monitoring all of this, as is our Keir Simmons, who is also in the region. He is in Erbil, Iraq. And Keir, I understand you have some new reaction as well from those around the region who are watching, with the world watching what President Trump has to say.
Yeah, Hallie, from here in Erbil, I'm just WhatsApping with senior people in governments across the region and well-connected people. And the impression I'm getting is just how quickly this is developing and how much folks are trying to catch up. And I should just say, this is all one-source reporting, but we know what President Trump has posted. So, just to show our work a little bit, President Trump has posted this. We're just getting reflections from folks around the region who, in this kind of developing situation, still don't want to put their name to things. And I guess people watching might say, well, that's understandable. But one well-connected person that I'm WhatsApping with, very well connected with the Israeli Prime Minister's office, says it's hard. I'm asking, are the Israelis agreeing to this? Hard to know right now, but then goes on to say Israel would be happy to end it now, given all of their successes. Meanwhile, a senior diplomat in the region WhatsApping to me, it makes sense. And then just to reiterate, an official with knowledge of these negotiations telling me just in the past hour that this is a negotiation that has been brokered by the Trump administration and by the Qataris. And as we said, Hallie, it's truly fascinating, as that diplomat WhatsApped to me just a few minutes ago, because, of course, it was the Qataris who were fired on by the Iranians just this evening, but were given notice and were able to shoot all those missiles down. We journalists are going to have some an interesting 24 hours. The 24 hours Richard is talking about, we're going to have an interesting 24 hours unpicking what exactly has gone on here.
To say the least, Keir, I'm going to ask you to stand by. I don't want to go to Matt Bradley because, Matt, as all this is happening, there are new evacuations that Israel has asked for in, I believe, parts of Iran, right? Parts of Tehran?
That's right. The IDF Farsi service has just released a post on X asking for people to leave the area of Mehran District 6 around Tehran. The Israeli army will operate in these areas. Now, we're also hearing that, it sounds as though this is actually what I described to you before, that there is going to be Iran stops shooting and then the Israelis get 12 full hours of play. Well, while the Iranians get no chance to fire back. This doesn't sound like the kind of negotiated agreement that Iran would agree to, but it really doesn't have much of a leg to stand on. So it might have agreed to this because out of desperation, it simply wanted Israel's attacks to end. Remember, as I was telling you, the fact is that the last couple of days, Israel has enjoyed complete air dominance. So it's almost as if they had a truce imposed without it being in the letter of the law. The Iranians were simply attacking here, Israel, the mainland, with these ballistic missiles, which themselves have been dwindling over the past couple of days. Now, this is definitely going to be a relief to Israelis who have really been terrified over the past 10 days, going back and forth to these bomb shelters and hearing the loud explosions and interceptions and, these missiles reaching their targets. But it's unclear how this is all going to work out on the Iranian side, if the Israelis are still going to be able to strike. And right just now, releasing new orders for new evacuations in huge areas of Tehran, even as the ceasefire is supposed to be imposed. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. The modus operandi that the Israelis have always been using in all of the theaters of conflict, especially over the last year and a half, and the one that I saw myself in Lebanon, is that the Israelis are going to be jockeying for position before the ceasefire silences the guns. They want to be in an advantageous position that they can exploit after they no longer have the ability to shoot first.
Matt, thank you. I want to have you stand by and bring in Elise Labott, the Murrow Press Fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Elise, I know you've been in touch with some of your contacts in the region as well.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And I mean, I think there's a sigh of relief that the fighting might stop for now. But I think there's a little bit of cynicism from sources I'm talking to, whether it holds. I think the impression is that both sides are, a little bit tired, building on what Matt says. Yes, the Israelis, really have had some successes. They'd be happy to take a pause because they also are, getting hit by the Iranian missiles. Their interceptors are running out faster than they can produce them. And they also just kind of could use a little breather. But sources say to me, listen, Israel does not have the same agenda that the U.S. has. Israel clearly is looking for ultimately regime change, whether that comes at the hand of the Israelis or it comes at the hand of the Iranian people themselves. They know that Iran can reconstitute their nuclear program because it was not, as we've been discussing over the last 48 hours, destroyed. If you kill the supreme leader, that's different than that kind of maybe puts the program more, in abeyance. And so I think there is a thought that the fighting might stop. Everyone kind of takes a little bit of breather and sees where they are. And don't forget, on the Iranian side, President Trump is not really offering a negotiation. He's saying a total surrender for your nuclear program. That's like kind of coming there and accepting their surrender. So a negotiation is going to take place. I don't really think the Iranians are ready to give up that program entirely. So I think the thought in the region is the fighting could stop. Everyone's going to live another day. But I think it's still going to be a very tense, couple of days, couple of weeks. We also, as this ceasefire is playing out, it's obvious that Israel is not going to stop until the Iranians have stopped for those 6 hours. So the Israelis can keep going and keep continuing to do that damage. What happens in these next 6 hours is very precarious.
Elise, thank you very much. Yamiche Alcindor is back with us covering the White House there. And Yamiche, we've heard from President Trump. I don't believe since he posted that truth social, if you will, about the ceasefire, we haven't heard from him, I don't believe, again, although there is no, so to speak, lid at the White House, right? Meaning it is not out of the realm of possibility that we hear from him again. We don't know if that's going to be the case, just putting that out there. We've also heard from Vice President Vance. And to Elise's point about the nuclear program from Iran, which, again, is the underpinning of the entire initial Saturday strike in the first place in many ways, was to destroy as much as possible Iranian capabilities on the nuclear front. The vice president certainly hopes, as the administration does, that Iran will not seek to rebuild. There is some skepticism, I think, from experts who observe the region about Iranian desire on that front. That's not your television. That's actually our audio here on that front. So we'll get Yamiche going. Yamiche, we got you now. Go ahead.
This is what happens when you're calling sources while also trying to pick them up. Okay, so what I've heard so far from the White House is that the president has repeatedly said that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It's a red line that he drew in the sand. It's part of the reason why he took this action on Saturday. The president and the White House are leaning in on this messaging that just happened, of course, in the last hour here, that the ceasefire has been brokered. We still, of course, are waiting for Israel and Iran. I could also tell you that I just talked to Steve Witkoff, who is someone who's been heavily involved in the negotiations between Iran and Israel, as well as, of course, the United States. He's a top aide to President Trump. He told me that he couldn't confirm the ceasefire, that he was just getting off a plane. That does not mean that the ceasefire hasn't been reached. What it tells me is that things have been moving very rapidly, and the president has spent all day in the Situation Room surrounded by a number of officials, including defense officials and top aides, while Steve Witkoff, by the way, is dealing with a number of other things, including Israel and Hamas, as well as Russia and Ukraine. But it tells me that things are moving quickly, and that if the ceasefire has been brokered, that the news of it is still spreading through the administration as all of this is happening. And as you pointed out, the vice president has been clear that he believes this war is over. But it also, to me, is very interesting that he's saying that Iran has decisions to make and that they would be smart to sort of continue to go toward the path of peace. But any sort of negotiations where Iran tries to have any sort of nuclear weapons being developed or any sort of raw materials being developed, that to me is going to signal that, of course, President Trump is going to, in some ways, say that that's not something that can happen, that Iran can't be doing that. So it's going to be I think, a very interesting night here as we continue to wait for the response from Iran, because I'm very interested to see how they're going to play this, whether or not they're going to confirm this or whether or not they're going to sort of maybe even confirm it in a way that makes them look like they've sort of taken a step toward retaliation while also seeking for peace. But I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this moves forward. And I'm just going to continue to call people and try not to stay off mute.
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead and mute yourself now, Yamiche. Thank you very much. I know you've been doing a ton of reporting, as has our team. We'll watch for more on that. Dan DeLuce, same deal. I think the big thing here, just the questions over the course of the next 6-12 hours. We're going to wake up and we're going to have, it may be a very different landscape. It may not be.
There are so many questions, and there are so many ways this can go wrong. And, keep in mind that Israel felt it had the upper hand. It was essentially winning from their point of view. They had owned the airspace, as we've been talking about. They could really hit any target that they wanted at will. And they were hitting not just the nuclear military sites, but some other sites.
Increasingly
really
symbolic to the regime, right?
Right. So the regime is fairly desperate for this to get a pause here. And in fact, their public line was, we might negotiate and have discussions once you get the Israelis to stop bombing us. That was their line before the U.S. attacked over the weekend. So they wanted a sort of unconditional ceasefire and then maybe some kind of discussions. So this ceasefire, if it holds, if this is real, it doesn't tell us what happens with Iran's nuclear program and their ambitions and all their work. And that is a really difficult thing to solve.
In the 3 minutes we have left, I want to get to our reporters in the region, including Keir Simmons, our chief international correspondent. Keir, I know you've been working the phones as well. Any updates for us?
Yeah, Hallie, I think as we wind this up, it's important to point to reports that we are hearing that are somewhat cynical about whether Iran has signed up to this. An Iranian news agency describing the announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and Iran as a false and delusional plan. Other news organizations are reporting Iranian sources saying they don't know about it. Now, here's the interesting thing with journalism, particularly a fast-moving story like this. Sometimes you talk to sources, Yamiche was indicating it with Steve Witkoff, you talk to sources who just aren't caught up. Maybe are a few hours behind. So it doesn't mean necessarily that there hasn't been a high-level deal done and that this is yet to filter down. I'm just looking down because I think we're going to get a statement from the Qataris sometime pretty soon, but I haven't got it yet. But, I guess all of this is to say this is a fast-moving, developing story, and we'll see, just as Dan said, whether the headline holds.
Matt Bradley, live for us in Tel Aviv. We'll leave the final thoughts to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think my skepticism is the same as Keir's, the same as Richard's. It's not so much skepticism as it is confusion about the terms of this deal. As I mentioned to you before, 12 hours in which the Israelis, it sounds like, would have free reign over Iran, where they wouldn't have to stop firing, whereas the Iranians would. Those 12 hours before presumably ending the war completely. Neither side has confirmed this deal. Neither side has announced that they will be giving up something or getting something in return. So no obvious quid pro quo, the kind of thing that would almost always go along with some sort of ceasefire deal like this. And no real expression that the Israelis have gotten what they planned on doing. This was one of the things that Benjamin Netanyahu has said about all the conflicts in his neighborhood, that he's not going to withdraw his troops. He's not going to cease firing until he gets what he wants, which is, in this case, the complete eradication of the Iranian nuclear program. And the big question looking forward is who signed this deal on the Iranian side? Is there Iranian regime left to commit to a deal like this? We still don't know. We don't know what happened to all of that uranium that's been enriched. We don't know what has happened to the offices and leaders and buildings who are in Tehran who would be governing this country after this ends. There's so many questions.
Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Our thanks to you, to Keir, to Dan, to Richard, to Yamiche, and the many others who have joined us in this rolling coverage and the day of fast-moving developments. Thank you for watching. We've got more coverage right here on NBC News Now, right now.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.